CIA alleges that Mossad encouraged protests against government in Israel. Hell of a headline. Oh, did you guys see the did you guys see the Likud? So for those of you who don't know, the Likud is Netanyahu's political party. It's a very, very, very right-wing political party in Israeli politics. Crazily enough, it is not the most right-wing party in Israeli politics. But don't worry, though, if you're a far-right maniac in Israel, Netanyahu did ally with the parties that are at all more to the far right than the Likud. So there is a extremely far-right government in power right now in Israel. And while in power, Netanyahu has decided with the coalition to try to push forward large-scale judicial reform. And what this judicial reform boils down to is that, well, there's a bunch of part of it. But the big thing that is pissing people off is that it seems to remove a lot of the authority or a lot of the checks and balances between the legislative branch and the judicial branch, which is something that is extremely important to have a decent amount of checks and balances in your society. Let me give you an example as to why. Because what this legislation would do is make it so that you could overrule a ruling by Israel's Supreme Court with a simple majority vote. So let's say if there's like an Israeli court case about freedom of expression for, I don't know, just some person, like some person said some offensive thing, and they're like, well, this is actually protected by the Israeli constitution under free speech. Then the parliament could come forward and say, actually, no, it isn't. We overrule it, and then boom, it's done. Now it's overruled, and now you've decided to remove the discretion from what is supposed to be, even if it isn't always the case, what was supposed to be an independent body that interprets the law and turns it into a popularity contest, which is not a good thing, because now you're moving away from, you know, a representative democracy with checks and balances into like a democracy that's running under mob rule. It also does not help that Israel doesn't have a constitution. You get the point. They are able to overrule the legal system. If there's a court case that interprets the law in one way, they come to the other way. Okay, don't let my American brain spoil the conversation too much here. Okay, my American brain with my American words. Okay, it also does not help the situation at all when it comes to how Netanyahu looks, that by getting rid of this divide between the judicial branch and the legislative branch, he could also use this, since he has a majority, in order to overrule cases against him on corruption, which he's currently seen brought against him for like large-scale corruption he engaged in while in office, including the accepting of gifts while in public office from, you know, officials, from people trying to garner his favor, which is, you know, very illegal. And now they tried to push it through. It failed because of large-scale backlash, and now it seems that they're preparing to try to do it again. They said that they're going to, you know, negotiate with the other parties now, and it's going to be different. But, you know, obviously, this does not mean that the Israeli public cannot react to it in a negative way, which they have, not only through the large-scale protests, but also we've finally gotten some polling data out of Israel to show how badly the Likud has been hurt, and how badly the far-right coalition has been hurt by this judicial reform. And they have been hurt bad. They've gone from the most popular party when it comes to like a plurality in Israeli politics, when it comes to their vote share, to the third most popular party in Israeli politics. They went down from 32 Knesset seats to 20 Knesset seats in polling. Meaning that if they were to hold an election today in Israel, Netanyahu's coalition would completely fall apart. Now, there's two things to say about this. The first thing is to say, obviously, this is bad for Netanyahu, that if they were to do a re-election right now, he would get body slammed. It wouldn't even be close. He would have like 33% less seats in the Knesset than he had before, and his far-right coalition would have less seats as well, meaning that they would be unable to hold power. They'd be unable to keep their government up, since their government is already held together by a very slight majority, held together by an extreme far-right coalition. So that's very bad for Netanyahu. But there's also another angle to this, which honestly is pretty concerning in my eyes. And the other angle to this is, this probably means that the far-right coalition that has, been somewhat poking and prodding at Netanyahu, because one of the big difficulties Netanyahu has had in office is keeping people like Ben-Gvir and other far-right maniacs in Israel who have said a lot of really offensive things and advocate for, the continued expansions of settlements in the West Bank, which is illegal under international law. He's tried to reel them in, and it's been hard to hold this coalition together. But if the far-right coalition and Likud and Netanyahu himself know that if they were to have another election, that they would be losing 33% of their Knesset seats, that's probably a big motivation to keep the far-right coalition together. If they know that if they were to, say, you know what, I'm done with this coalition, bring it to the polls, let's have an election, that they'd all basically get scalped. They'd all get scalped, to get their pockets ran, and they would be dazed and confused as they stumbled around the Israeli legislature trying to figure out what was going on. Since they know that, they're probably not going to call for another election until they absolutely have to. Israel's gone through a lot of elections, election after election after election after election, because governments keep breaking down because the margins are so slight and the amount of Knesset seats that are changing hands are so little. But even if they've called for so many elections beforehand, they've never been in a situation like this where the backlash has been so immense, where the protests were so gigantic. And I do want to throw one more element to the story, because I've already covered most of what I wanted to say about this. It is a recent, this is pretty wild story. I haven't seen anybody else on Twitch cover it, so I don't know if you guys know about it. But have you guys heard about the Mossad? For those of you who don't know, the Mossad is like the Israeli CIA. They are very, very good at what they do. I don't know if I want to get into too much detail about what they do, but there was a document leak in the United States that I already covered on the channel, and there should be either a video up on my second channel now, or it's going to be up tomorrow about it, about how there was a massive government document dump, a big government document leak from slides and presentations from the Joint Chiefs of Staff showing a lot of information about Ukraine, showing, the composition of new units that are being trained by the United States and the Ukrainian military, showing the schedule for equipment deliveries, showing a bunch of information about Ukrainian air defense, showing that we're spying on Zelensky and the Ukrainian government, which isn't a surprise, but all allies mostly spy on each other. Well, not mostly spy on each other, but they do spy on each other. It's just not supposed to be said out loud because it's bad for relations, but that happens in basically every country. Like, every single ally spies on each other. The Chinese spy on the North Koreans, the North Koreans spy on the Chinese. It happens everywhere. Well, in that leak, as the information that's been dropped is still being sorted through, even though there could be more information drops in the future, there was one information drop that got dropped that had to deal with Israel, because not all of it had to do with Ukraine. Some of it actually had to do with the Indo-Pacific. Some of it had to do with the Middle East. Some of it had to do with terrorism. So all of the documents that leaked didn't have to do with Ukraine. They had to do with other topics as well. I just noticed something. I looked up the Mossad, and if you look in people also search for, there's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's not too crazy. That's like the Iranian, I don't think there's really an equivalent to the IRGC in Iran, but that's like a really powerful institution in Iran. And then there's the Luftwaffe, which was just the Nazi Air Force. I don't know why this is here. Why would somebody search specifically for the Mossad and then the Luftwaffe? Is there some like secret history that I'm unfamiliar with here? Anyway, so what the documents leaked about Israel, which was super interesting, is that the CIA was garnering signals intelligence from the Israeli government and got some information from the Mossad that, according to the CIA, indicates that the Mossad was actually encouraging its employees, its Mossad agents, to go out and protest against the government. Here it is being reported by the New York Times. Israel denies leaked claim that spy agency leaders encouraged protest. This is super, super crazy. I mean, think of that headline. CIA alleges that Mossad encouraged protests against government in Israel. Hell of a headline. Definitely, since the Mossad is not supposed to even work in domestic politics. The Mossad is not an internal security thing. It's an external. It's supposed to do intelligence gathering and like special ops types operations on the international stage. They're not even supposed to work on the domestic stage. Let's read a little bit of the article. The Israeli government issued a statement on Sunday, firmly rejecting assertions contained in the leaked Pentagon documents that the leadership of the Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence service, had encouraged the agency staffs and Israeli citizens to participate in the anti-government protests that roiled the country in March. Mossad and other senior Israeli defense officials denied the assessment's findings, and the New York Times was unable to independently verify the U.S. intelligence assessment. Okay, so it's not independently verified, but it is with the leaked documents. And I do want to put out there that in the leaked documents, we do know that some stuff has been manipulated. Now, does that mean it was manipulated from when it was first posted on the Discord chats that some of it was originally tracked to, or the 4chan boards, or was it always like that? It was posted originally manipulated. Who knows? Specifically, we know that the troop death numbers for the Ukraine war, for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the numbers were switched by people going in and editing it after the fact in order to make it look like the Russians had lost less men than they had lost, and the Ukrainians had lost a lot more men. The original estimate seemed to say it was like about 15,000 to 16.5 thousand for March 1st on the amount of soldiers that Ukraine has like lost to death, not like injuries, but like died, compared to like, I think it was like 30,000 to 45,000 for the Russian government. And the numbers were not only switched, but then the Ukrainian numbers was then inflated to like 72,000. And so we do know that the stuff can be manipulated afterwards. So the fact that they had actually, you know, the fact that we don't know for sure if this document is real or it has been manipulated after the fact, it is yet to be verified, that should be mentioned, because, you know, it could be manipulated, but we don't know for sure. It also could very well be true. Mossad and other senior Israeli defense officials denied the assessment's findings, and the New York Times were unable to independently verify the U.S. intelligence assessment. The statement issued on Sunday by the Israeli Prime Minister's office on behalf of the Mossad described the assertion as without any foundation whatsoever. This is interesting because this was issued by the Israeli Prime Minister's office. So the Israeli Prime Minister's office falls under Netanyahu's government, meaning that Netanyahu's government is saying that the Mossad was not involved in fomenting protests in Israel, even though that would be against his government. And so I don't know if that is him being honest, as in, you know, this is completely malicious and this is not true about our glorious Mossad and the type of activities they engage in. This is not a foreign assassination. This is domestic. They don't do that. Or if this is something else. I don't know. I think it would be pretty embarrassing for his government, even if he was to admit that, you know, everybody was out to get him, including the Mossad. If he was to throw that information out there, reveal that information to the world, it would still be pretty humiliating to have the Mossad be undermining Netanyahu from right under his feet. Senior U.S. officials said the FBI was working to determine the source of the leaked documents. The officials acknowledged that the documents appeared to be legitimate intelligence and operational briefs compiled by the Pentagon Joint Chiefs of Staff using reports from government intelligence community, but that at least one had been modified from the original at some point. The apparent authenticity of the documents, however, is not an indication of their accuracy. Israel, which, oh yeah, that's another thing. Like, the signals intelligence we gotten could have just been wrong as well. That is true. Israel, which returned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to power in December as the head of the most far-right government coalition in history, was paralyzed by protests and strikes in March after the government revealed plans to overhaul the country's judiciary. The proposed changes, which were criticized by Israel's closest ally, the United States, aimed to curb judicial review of legislation and give government more control in the selection of judges. According to the leaked documents, an assessment attributed to the Central Intelligence Update from March 1st, leaders of the Mossad and I quote, advocated for Mossad officials and Israeli citizens to protest against the new Israeli government's proposed judicial reforms, including several explicit calls to action that decried the Israeli government. According to these documents, the information was obtained through signals intelligence. Many of the leaked documents are labeled with orders that they are to be only shared among American intelligence agencies. Current and former Israeli officials said the agency's rules and long-standing tradition of nonpartisanship would have precluded direct involvement by the agency's leadership in a political crisis. The Israeli government said in a statement that the Mossad and senior officials did not and do not encourage any personnel to join the demonstrations against the government, political demonstrations, or any political activity. It added, the Mossad and its serving senior personnel have not engaged in the issue of the demonstrations at all and are dedicated to the value of service to the state that has guided the Mossad since its founding. My goodness. Some Mossad employees, however, requested and received permission to participate in the demonstrations as private citizens. I do also want to throw out there that I've read some interpretations that the signals intelligence could very well be real, but that they misinterpreted what was being said, that they mixed up words like, oh, you know, we encourage you to go out and do it, and you're allowed to do it. But wrapping this all up in a bow, I don't really know exactly what the motivation would be for the Mossad to do this in the first place. That's part of the reason why I'm still somewhat skeptical of the story, not only because it has yet to be independently verified, but also because I don't really know what the Mossad gains by undermining Netanyahu. As Netanyahu's government has said since the fact, you know, the organization isn't supposed to do this. This is not even their jurisdiction. Not to mention the fact that I don't understand what about Netanyahu would specifically inspire the Mossad to act against them unless the Mossad is acting on behalf of the system of checks and balances in Israel, which would be weird because I don't know of anything else in Israeli history, any other examples in Israeli history of this happening. And I really would not know the motivation. I mean, the only thing that I've been able to, you know, whittle my way down to, you know, by, you know, just whittling down on this piece of wood, trying to like figure out something, is maybe they think that if Israeli society breaks down due to the far right coalition and there's more disunity in the state, this could make Israel weaker and make it easier for like other countries like Iran, which is under their purview, to take advantage of this weak spot and attack or try to undermine Israeli influence. I mean, but I'm honestly stretching here, and all we can do is speculate and wait for more information to come out. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Because I genuinely don't know. When I saw this headline, which was the headline I saw that jolted me, I forget if it was a headline or if it was like a Twitter post where somebody interpreted the story. It was CIA uncovers Mossad plot to influence Israeli politics. It was pretty wild, man. I think the Mossad thinks Bibi is a national security risk, and he kind of is. I mean, he's a national security risk in his like general vicinity to Ben-Gvir and other people like him, and his going after the judiciary, maybe because it can break down Israeli society. I think it was like 75 to 80% of Israelis are against judicial reform. It's like an overwhelming percentage, and they're still trying to slam it through. And maybe the Mossad thinks that amount of disunity in Israeli society could be a problem. I really don't know. Again, all we can do is speculate.